Welcome to the Patryk Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patryk Switek. Patryk is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom. Each week, we sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals in the real estate industry and delve into their personal journeys, lessons learned, and secrets to their success. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Jesse Vasquez, welcome to the Patryk Real Estate Show. You are somebody that I wanted on the show for a long time. You're a friend of mine, I would say, but we do a lot of texting and we don't really talk to each other face to face. So this is the first time that I even caught up with you before the show. For a whole 10, 15 minutes, we had such great conversation. I want to just get started in the podcast and introduce you to everybody. For the people that don't know, Jesse is the Midterm Rental King. He's got around 40 units, mixed, managed, and owned. And he teaches midterm rentals to people around the country. He has over 350 students, and he's a big industry leader in this space. It's a very new industry, but for the people that don't know, for midterm rentals are usually 30 plus days. It's legal in a lot of areas, and I'm sure Jesse's going to go really deep into all this stuff. But without further ado, Jesse, welcome to the show, man.
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me here. And yeah, if you guys could have heard our conversation offline, you would have been like, these two knuckleheads, or maybe just one knucklehead. Oh, that's funny, man. Yeah, you summed it up. I've been doing the midterm space since 2015. So it's been around for a long time, Patryk. I think a lot of people look at it like it's new, but it's actually been around for years. But it's just getting the popularity now because of, you just said it a minute ago, there's a lot of regulations happening. People can't Airbnb anymore, and the next best option is midterming. So it's just continuing to grow in the space. One of the things that I like to bring up when I talk about the growth and the popularity is I think, and I own Airbnbs too, just so everybody knows listening to this, that Airbnb has been around for some time. But if you think about like football, it's in the third quarter, like coming into the fourth quarter, my personal opinion. And the midterm space is like, umpires are just out. They're just chalking the field. They're getting ready to get out there. That's how early we are in this game right now. So for those of you that don't know midterm rentals, like right now is the perfect time to start learning about it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. There's definitely a lot of people that are not in the midterm rental space or don't even know what it is, but they know what short-term rentals are. And it's crazy because, yeah, it's just a new and coming space. But Jesse, I want to know a little bit more about your background. How did you stumble upon it in 2015? Were you the only one doing it at the time, or were there others? Take us back a little bit. Give us a history lesson.
Yeah, I was definitely the only one doing it. No, I wasn't. So I worked in the healthcare industry for 17 years, and I started in healthcare in 2003. I started off by I was a delivery driver for an oxygen company that was considered a healthcare company. And I remember seeing this dude, and you guys, this is context of the story, so it comes full circle. I was a delivery driver, so I was basically the lowest Patryk on the totem pole, right? Just a delivery driver. This dude came walking in, and for those of you that are watching right now, he looked exactly like David Spade. And he was like pointing at people with a fake gun, and like everybody was like laughing. Like you would see like on the show The Office. Everybody just loved the guy. And I was like, I want to do what that guy does. And my boss at the time looked at me and started laughing. And he's like, you can't do what that guy does. He's the #1 sales rep in the entire nation. And he's a college educated, blah, 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 goes in the whole spiel. And I'm just like, well, why can't I do that? So about 6 months later, I kept pressuring my boss about this role. I ended up getting a sales job, the same one that David Spade lookalike had. And his name was Matt, just so everybody knows. And I learned from him. He was the best sales rep in the country when it came to oxygen sales and CPAPs, BiPAPs, all those medical device things. So I learned about medical devices. I ended up getting into more of the healthcare, working for hospitals. And the years went by where I was in a hospital in 2015, Patryk, and this nurse who had this amazing accent, she was saying things like, don't you know? And isn't he a doll? You know what that accent's from?
No.
Fargo, North Dakota. Come on, Patryk. Everybody knows that.
I don't know my Central America, okay?
Yeah, and I was just like, I was drawn to that because I'm in California and everybody says dude and bro and man all the time, right?
Yeah.
Just like I do and like you do. I was drawn to that and I asked her name was Barbara, by the way, and she said, I was like, what are you doing here? She's like, I'm a travel nurse. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. What are you doing in Modesto? This was in Modesto. And she said, this is one of the best counties that pay the best in the United States. And I was asked her, where are you living? And she said, Motel 6. And there was a Motel 6 on 9th Street. So they're familiar with Modesto. It's like the crappiest prostitute-ridden, drug-infested motel you'd ever think of. This clinician was working 15-hour days, staying at the Motel 6, and guess how much she was paying a month for Motel 6 in
How
2015?
much?
$2,900 a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah, dude. So I
What?
realized I didn't own any real estate. I wasn't even thinking about real estate, but I like flipped on the switch where I was like, holy crap, in
Opportunity.
2015, I could buy a property right now for 280,000, 275. My mortgage rate would be about $1,500 a month. So I can cash flow about $2,000 a month, maybe $1,500 a month from literally just buying a piece of real estate. And that's what I did. And I asked her, I said, hey, how do I get in contact with the companies that you work for? How do I get in contact with these folks? And she said, go down to the HR department in the hospital and just ask what companies they work with and who their recruiter is that they're connected to. And so I go down, and for those of you that work in a hospital, like when you go into a hospital, you have to have a badge, like you have to badge in everywhere. And I seen this nurse, she was going into this room where it said HR, big, giant, beautiful letters, and you have to badge to get in there. So she badged, went in, and as the door was shutting, Patryk, imagine a movie scene right now. You guys are listening to this or watching this. The door starts to slowly shut, pans down to the bottom, and all of a sudden you see a shoe. My shoe stops, literally stops the door from closing. I open the door and I go in there, and this woman named Misty that's sitting at the desk, she had a big giant name tag. And I was like, hey, I just talked to Barbara on tele floor 3, and she talked about she wanted me to talk to you about housing travel nurses. And she's, what are you doing? Like, why are you in here? And I let her know that I was looking to invest in real estate before I even had anything, and that I wanted to house Barbara and other barbers that were all coming into this market. And she said, we've been looking for somebody that has properties or that is able to house these people, because right now there's nowhere for them to stay. And this is before Airbnb became like a big deal in the Central Valley or just in general. And that opened the door, man. I got in contact with a company called AMN Healthcare. I ended up getting a contract with the hospital. So the hospital paid me to have their physicians and certain doctors and certain residents stay at my property. So within 3 months, I bought my first property, got that contract, and then started housing clinicians. And so that's where it started. And the reason why all this stuff worked is because, first off, I was willing to take a risk. I was able to go where people weren't allowed to go, which was that HR room. And I just took that risk and
got creative.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times we have these potentials and these abilities to do these things in our own backyard, even in our workspace. And it's up to us to see those opportunities and take
You know what, Jesse? I actually heard a quote called, it was something along the lines of, embarrassment is the killer of success. And like, you could be super embarrassed without a badge to stop the door with your foot, like almost out of a scene of a movie, and you did it. And you opened the door, and instead of, what are you doing here? You took it as an opportunity. And I think that's huge, man. So you're an entrepreneur in my book. That's something that an entrepreneur would do, is see an opportunity and run after it.
Here's the crazy thing about that. And I think a lot of people, I've come to the terms that, and Patryk, maybe we can have this discussion a little bit later, if entrepreneur is nature or nurture. Because I didn't grow up with my dad worked for Foster Farms. He was a scientist that worked, and this is probably the worst thing to say ever, but my dad was one of the guys that used to inject chickens to grow faster back in the 80s. That was his job.
Oh my God.
And everybody hates those people. And they're like, oh, we hate my dad. That's what my dad did. He worked he was a biology major, got hired at Foster Farms. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So my dad had a very steady career. I wasn't one of those kids that was selling freaking baseball cards in elementary school, like you hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about. I just happened to see the opportunity there, and I just took advantage of it. And yes, I think you're absolutely right.
Are you making the point that it's in your nature to take those opportunities?
I believe that something within me saw an opportunity, and that was when I started reading. I started to open my mind to reading books. I was opening my mind to learning a little bit more. I believe in like frequencies and energy, and you guys might think this is weird, but I think when you start thinking in a different way, you start attracting these kinds of things. And this stuff, like it drew me in. It just pushed me in, again, to it. I wasn't, again, looking to invest in real estate or anything like that. I was like on a self-discovery mission. And for me, this is what I'm doing now. It's been a journey since 2015.
Have you ever read the book, The Genie Within?
I have not.
Okay. So it is a book about the subconscious being a real thing. And so the energies and everything you're explaining, there's real scientific facts behind it. So I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah.
Now
people
I'm
do
sure,
though. People think I'm
Well,
nuts sometimes. They're like, you're
Well,
crazy.
maybe when Saturn is going down and then we're in Renegade or whatever, and we decide the world is ending, then we'll have a little bit of reality check. But I think what you're talking about with respect to that is there's scientific proven background to that.
Yeah.
Um, all jokes aside, though, I think that was really cool opportunity that you landed on. Where did that really get you? What was like the next step for you to scale that? Was that something that you even knew you could scale? Did you think you were going to build this big company, or was it just a one-time hit?
Yeah, I was cash flowing enough to be able to save. And just so you guys know, I didn't go out and buy a freaking Tesla, or they didn't have to. Did they have Teslas in 2015? I don't know. I don't know if they did or not. I didn't go
Yeah.
out and buy this expensive car. I literally did not touch a single penny, Patryk. So for that first year, I had about $25,000. I just deployed that into my next property. So over the next several years, I just bought another property every year with the money that I was making from those properties. And just so you guys know, like making $2,000 on one door, freaking amazing. In rural middle California, the armpit of California, which is Modesto, Central Valley, like who would have thought? And the reason being is that there was not enough clinicians to meet the demand for patients. There was only one college that had 30 graduates a year. Half of those graduates did not even stay in the Central Valley. They went off to school somewhere else. It was just one of those like perfect storms, being in the right place, seeing the opportunity. And as I mentioned before, I worked in healthcare, so I would go to all these different hospitals. That was my job, was to go in and sell the services of the company that I worked for and get these patients that would be referrals. And every hospital I went to, from San Francisco to Los Angeles, guess what was in those hospitals? Barbaras. All over the place,
There you
travel
go.
nurses. They had those cool accents. So I recognize that it's a huge opportunity. And I just took advantage of it, and it started to snowball on its own. People started asking me, we're talking about co-hosting, would ask, hey, I see what you're doing. Can you help me with mine? All this while I was still working at W-2, a high earning W-2. I was making about $200,000 a year at my sales job. I was kicking ass there and doing very well. That's a good life for a lot of people. But I realized in 2000 when COVID hit, I know that a lot of people have some negative emotions behind COVID, but for me, I was one of the people that was one of the great resignation, right? Everybody resignated from roles. And for me, that was like an eye-opening experience where I saw that there was other opportunities that I could go all in on, and I didn't necessarily have to do what I was doing anymore. I was driving to the Bay Area, Patryk, which is like, it's about 100 miles from me, but in traffic, you're like, it's rough, man. I was doing these Bay Area trips back and forth on a regular basis, and I just realized I can do what I'm doing and I can go all in on it, and I can make a living out of it. In fact, when I told my family that I was doing that, my daughter, who's 20 now, who's going to college in San Diego in January, she called my mom. And for those of you that are Hispanic, know like when your mom gets involved in stuff, like stuff's really going down. My mom calls me, dude, and she's like, Grace just called me right now and she said you quit your job. Is this true? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what are you gonna do? This is the dumbest thing I've ever had. You have the best job. Granted, this was the best job that I potentially could get in the Central Valley, where the
I
average
mean, you're
wage is,
making bank. You're
I
making
know.
$200,000. That's the golden handcuffs.
And that's
Why
exactly
leave,
what I
right?
had, dude. And I just realized that there was more for me than that, that I could do
So
something else.
what did you realize though? Because the golden handcuffs, there's a lot of people that I know, at least maybe even in the community, that are in that position where they feel like, oh, why don't I not leave? Because then I can leverage all the lending programs and all these other stuff with the W-2 and get easy lending for properties or whatever the reason is, or, oh, I have to sustain a certain lifestyle for my family. Where was that pivotal point for you that you made? Was it a number that you hit, or was it internal realization?
Yeah, I mean, I was at that point. I was making about $8 to $10,000 a month on my properties. That was about what I was making a month on my W-2 job after taxes and stuff. And I realized that I was too comfortable, dude. I was too normal. And I've never been somebody that's been normal. In fact, I didn't even graduate high school. I didn't graduate high school. Who doesn't graduate?
Yeah.
What an idiot doesn't graduate high school.
Mhm.
I just knew early on in my life, and I'm not telling everybody to not graduate high school. But what I'm trying to put across right now is that I was really down on myself for not having those traditional. The first thing that you do is graduate high school and you go and do these things. I was an idiot, used to skateboard, hung out with the wrong people. I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like this whole, I always tried to forge my own path. So in this way, I've always been somebody that's had that mentality to do things. And the reason why I bring this up is because for years I used to beat myself up. Like I didn't graduate high school. I didn't do these, but I was making $200,000 a year. And the only reason why I was able to do that is because there was one thing that I learned very early on. And Patryk, do you know what that is?
What did you learn?
I learned how to talk to people, how to
Mm.
communicate, have people know and trust me. Those are literally the three things that I learned. So if anybody can go out and read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's the only book that you will ever get your
My
entire
favorite
life,
book.
and you study that, I promise you, you'll be good at something. And that's that one thing that I just picked up very early in my life, and I was able to get along with everybody. Most people, I'm sure there's a few people out there that are like, screw this guy. But I had that ability to naturally get along with people, which is why I was good at sales, because I was like relatable in a lot of ways. So for me, I just leveraged that. But again, to go back to what I was talking about, I beat myself up for many years because I didn't go the traditional route, getting a high school diploma, getting a college education, like doing the things that my dad did, who was super successful, worked for foster farms, pumping chickens full of antibiotics, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't do that. And for me, up until a few years ago, I finally realized like, I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay now not doing that. But I learned a lot of things along the way. And I think that for me, I'm not supposed to be normal. Like I'm not supposed to do what everybody else is doing, the conventional job, doing the 9 to 5 thing. That's not for me. Granted, I've never worked more in my entire life, Patryk. You probably know this. I work more now than I've ever worked in my entire life, hands down. And that's what entrepreneurship is. It's you figure it out, you put your head down. We were just talking about this offline a minute ago. I'm still figuring a lot of things out.
Yeah.
I'm still figuring out how to do things. And I think that people that you think that for some reason they have it all together, they don't. They're still figuring it out. They're still trying to make things work. And for me,
And I just want to note this before the call, before we started this podcast, I literally told Jesse just that. I was like, hey, man, I saw you look like you have your shit together. Every time I see you're doing the right things in the right time, with the right people. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. That's what he said. And it's crazy. and
Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm doing half the time. I feel like I'm just winging this podcast because I don't have an itinerary for this podcast. There's no agenda. We just started and I'm just figuring it out. And I don't know if people are going to love this or going to hate this. I can't tell, but I'm just going true to who I am, and I'm sure Jesse's doing the same thing, being true to who he is. And we're just going to go flow with it. We're just going to flow with it and hopefully teach a few things. But that's the cool part, man. And I'll relate to that entrepreneurial urge that you had early on and taking the traditional path. I was the same way. I took that traditional path, and I remember at one point telling myself, if this is I was sitting at a W-2 job, pumping my 401k just like they told me to do, with the good grades, did all that.
Who's they?
And I sat there and said, if this is success, I don't fucking want it.
Yeah.
That's what I remember telling myself. Yeah. And I said, I want to be home with my parents because I was working Christmas Eve. I wanted to be home with my parents in Chicago celebrating Christmas Eve. I know the Latino culture also celebrates Christmas Eve.
Right.
And from there I was like, screw this. I get it, man. I was there. Was there a big moment for you that you thought, okay, this is I'm assuming it's COVID, right? COVID was that opportunity where you're like, okay, now I'm done with this.
But it wasn't that opportunity, and I'm going to take off work and get paid, because a lot of people did that. Right? They just quit their jobs. I was making $200,000 a year. Unemployment was going to pay me like $2,000 a month. So what happened to me, dude, is, and now I look back at it and I'm just like, this is crazy. COVID was bad for a lot of people. A lot of entrepreneurs got screwed over. People lost lives. There was a guy I worked in healthcare. I was in sales. Was I essential? No. There was a guy that I worked with that was about 5 years older than me. He ended up dying of COVID because we ended up having these meetings that our bosses like would put together, and we would literally be like, he was sick, or people were sick in our group, and would be like, I don't feel good. The boss would be like, come in. And this dude, his name was Gio, went to work, was sick with COVID, and died. And at that point, I'm just like, and this is again early on when like people didn't really know what was going on. Now I look back and I'm like, yeah, people lost their lives and stuff, but it was probably a little bit too much in a lot of ways. But for me, that's when I realized like I'm not in control of my life. Like my boss is telling me to go when literally a coworker of mine is 5 years older than me literally died from COVID, like literally died. And now I'm going back and sitting in these offices these meetings that are pointless for me to be in. And it was just that moment that I'm just like, these people don't care about me. They don't care about what I'm doing. They want the sales. And dude, I was making that company millions of dollars, literally millions, because I was in charge of all of our entire sales crew. I remember telling him, I'm not going to go to that. We can do these things virtual. Literally, one of our employees just died, and I'm not going to do that. And he's like, you can stay at home then. And I remember that moment, I was just like, all right, that's fine. And that was it, dude. That I didn't quit purposely. I didn't quit. It was just like, I'm done. This is enough for me. I don't need to do this anymore. And I'm glad it happened that way. I'm glad I didn't just go back in. I'm glad I didn't just put my head down and be like, I got to do this kind of stuff. I'm glad I was like, creating my own path and not knowing what was going to happen. I probably should have planned it out. And for those of you that are thinking about leaving your W-2, make sure you get a plan together, give yourself some time, leverage your W-2 money that you make to buy more loans if you guys are going to be able to pick up more loans, the conventional route, because once you do W-2 stuff, you need to have 2 years of income showing on your business. And there's just stuff that I didn't do the right way, but in retrospect, it happened for a reason. And I truly believe that we get to choose our choices and we get where we are because of those choices. And it started with that foot in the door, man. That foot in the door.
It started with the foot in the door, and quite literally, foot in the door.
Literally.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So obviously you took that leap, and for you're very similar to me in a lot of ways, where you don't really plan as much. If I'm assuming, you just do it and then you learn as you go.
Yeah. I got a lot to say about that though, Patryk, because I'm learning that as we go along. Yeah.
Okay. What do you have to say about it?
The lack of planning for me has been a super negative in a long time, a long time coming. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because as you start building your businesses, you're probably just like me, like you just mentioned, I'm a visionary. I am not a integrator. Maybe you are. I find it very rare to find somebody that is both a visionary and integrator. So it's hard for me I could talk about big picture stuff, big ideas, all these things all day long. That's easy. The hard part is integrating, is like putting those things on paper and making them happen. And that's what's super difficult for me. So when I talk about doing these things, you have to make sure you hire the right people that are opposite of what you're doing, that are opposite. Like I can't work with another visionary. If you came to me and Patryk, hey, let's start a company, I'd be like, I'd have you take a DISC assessment and I'd see if you and I would work together.
I don't think it would work. We could work in other ways. How about that?
Yeah, we would just be talking about doing things and ideas, and it would be hard to execute. Stephanie's probably your integrator. She's probably the person that comes in and
she's a little bit more of an integrator, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
it's just, and we've talked about it. She's definitely a lot more of an integrator. She understands how to execute on stuff. She was a nurse. She's incredible. My co-founder for STR Nation, for anybody that's wondering. But yeah, to your point, 100% need to be around those people. And so did you find that integrator?
I did, actually. I worked with this woman at the healthcare company that I was at, super sharp. She was from the Philippines, ended up working with her. She ended up leaving that job too, and I ended up hiring her, working together, and her and I started.
So Jesse, why do we both have Filipino partners? What's going on here? Are they just the best integrators, or what's going on?
I don't have her anymore, but I did. She ended up leaving the country, going back home and doing her thing, but she helped piece this all together, the puzzle together. And me going back to what I'm talking about, where I was talking about now, is I left my W-2 job in 2020. So that's almost 4 years. I left my job July 17th at 2:47 p.m. Don't ask me how I know that. 37 seconds, by the way. I know the exact time and date, like everything that I was doing. But yeah, she came on board with me, and then we decided, let's do this. And she worked with me for a couple years. I left earlier this year, but and now I'm running everything myself, and I'm working on getting, I have a whole team now. Like we have a whole, both hosting side, academy side, the midterm rental side. So we have a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, definitely a COO or somebody of that nature is like who I need to hire next. And I am the type of person that hires slow now. I'm not going to like go out and fill a hole. I believe in hiring slow and firing fast. I think that's a really important thing to do. I think we spend a lot of time with people sometimes that we realize aren't the best employees. And I've learned this over the years. We try to give them another chance. And that goes the same thing. I believe that the way one person does one thing is the way they do everything. And I learned that again, like very early on. So for me, I'm still in that process. When I say I don't know what I'm doing, that's me learning these other things that I'm having to figure out that I'm not necessarily good at. And I think, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, that's what entrepreneurship, whether that's starting your first Airbnb, getting your listing live, getting the right amenities in there, hiring the right VA, same process, same thing. You're still figuring it out. Granted, we have resources everywhere to learn about these things and for free with YouTube, but it's still a learning process.
Yeah. And we're talking a lot about business now. People might be thinking, what does business have to do with midterm rentals?
Yeah, that's a good thing. Good question. What I've been doing over the years and why I've been successful in this space is because I have built my own house on my own land. Unlike Airbnb, Mark Simpson, he's one of my good friends. He says something that I love. If you are on Airbnb, you're basically Brian Chesky's employee. And what he means by that is that at any moment, Airbnb can either pull your listing, a guest can throw a party at the house, you can bust them for it, and then Airbnb shuts your listing down for 4 or 5 days while they're investigating. And then when they decide, Patryk, your place is ready to go again, we'll get you up and live. You don't actually own your business. Airbnb does. You're waiting for clients to book. You just have the platform that allows you to do that. And that's freaking amazing. What other platform can you have an iPhone 7 take pictures and post them online and get bookings, like literally make money. So for me, what I do the route, what I just mentioned a minute ago, I'm creating a business by going after these agencies, these healthcare companies, insurance companies, and building relationships with them so that they're giving me clients that are going to be coming into my own market. We can talk about what those clients look like, but that's to give you a rough example. Like, I'm not worried about who's going to book my place. Like, I already have the resources and the clients that will send me those referrals where I don't have to wait around and hope I get booked, like the pick me kind of thing with Airbnb.
How do you even know? Let's go back even further. How do you even know which property to buy for midterm rentals or which to not? I know Furnish Finders is one of those places where you can get some stats, but how do you underwrite it?
Yeah, I look at, so I like to have the most average home in the United States is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, right? We know that. That's the number one purchased home in the United States. I like to have exit strategies from day one. If I'm buying something, I can Airbnb it. If I'm in a market that allows me to do that, that's an exit strategy. And number two, I like to host insurance claims. So if somebody loses their home due to a fire, a flood, some kind of catastrophic event, which we've been seeing over the last couple of years here in the States, and every 88 seconds in the US, somebody loses their home due to a fire, flood, or some kind of event. So there's people that are like literally needing these homes all the time. So for me, those insurance claims for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and I'm in Central Modesto right now, Central California in the Bay Area. I have property in Houston as well. We get claims that are 3 to 5x long-term rental rates. Give you an example. We have a lot of properties that are booked right now for $8,000 a month. My mortgage is $1,500. So I'm pocketing literally $5K a month from one property. How else are you going to be able to get that? With Airbnb, I'm not going to be able to make that. Maybe not in a different market, but not in Central California. I also have a company called Gallo. Have you had Apothic wine before, Patryk?
No.
You never had that? Okay. There's a company called Gallo Winery. And I listed on Furnish Finder. And there's what's called unmatched leads. So everybody that has a notepad right now, take some notes on this. There's unmatched leads. So when you list on Furnish Finder, used to be a place where travel nurses looked for property. I become good friends with Brian Payne, who's the CEO of that company. And over the last 2 years, 50% of their clients now are not nurses. So there are people that are just looking for properties, whether that's an insurance claim company, whether that's a construction company looking for housing. And I was able to call these leads and just ask, hey, I see that you guys are looking for a property. Can you tell me what you're doing? And it was this one woman, she was a recruiter for Gallo Winery, which is the company I was telling you about, in my backyard. They were looking to house international engineers that were going to help create wine. And they were going to work for 6 months. So I ended up talking to this woman, creating a relationship with her, and now we have a 6-month term booking with that company, which is in my backyard, where they'll house these folks that come stay in rural America, by the way, you guys, Central California, and has these engineers that will come stay at our home every year at the same time. And that's really how you start building your business. And there's a lot of these things around, and that's just an example. Another one, you've heard of a Dave & Buster's before, Patryk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were having one built in my market, and I happened to see a truck, it had a big work truck that was out there. It had Alabama plates, and there was a big giant plastering of the company and their phone number on there. And I'm like, pick up the phone, dialed that company the next day. I ended up finding out another group of engineers. They were from out of state. They were staying at a Holiday Inn Express. As I was talking to this woman, I was going on kayak.com, looking at the prices of these things. $202 a night. There was 5 dudes. So 202 times 5, what is that? $1,000.
That's 1,000.
1,000 times 30 days a month. What is that at?
30K.
30,000. I said, hey, I have a 5-bedroom house. Would you be willing to work with me if I was able to save you over $20,000 a month? And she laughed and was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I literally have a property that's right around the corner from the job site. And she said, we have a 6-month project. I said, we can rent this house to you for 10K. And she's really? And I was like, yeah. And at the end of the day, we ended up getting that booking. They stayed for 8 months. Paid $10,000, $80,000 on a property, and it was literally just by me driving by somewhere, seeing that there was a truck out there, and then making a call. And I think a lot of times how simple is that to think about? But most people just aren't thinking about, and hopefully after this podcast, people start to open their eyes about there's other ways to make income in this space. It does take more work. It is not passive in any way at all, but it is a way to build your own business, and it is a way to build your own space in this type of
Rolodex. You're building a Rolodex.
100%.
And what's interesting, Jesse, and I think people that are listening for short-term rentals can understand this as well. I actually talked to I'm going to butcher their name. The Mayon Group, I think. Is that how you say it? It's an LA-based group. They do luxury Airbnbs only. And I talked to one of the people that work there, and they explained how they don't use Airbnb barely ever. And they just do everything through referrals and through their network. And then they have people that pretty much go through a CRM. They have a whole CRM, which is a customer relationship management platform. And they have all of the different connections, and they keep hitting them up. And they'll message, oh yeah, I have these artists in town that need a place to stay for 3 nights or whatever. And that's how they do all of their business. But because of that, they can do weddings, first of all, which makes a lot more money. They get bookings that are higher than market rates because they control the inventory and they control the relationship versus, and on their side, they get a consistent experience. And so they know they're going to work with somebody that's solid, that's really good at what they do. They're going to book the place with them, and they get whatever specific pricing. I think it's such a great model where you own the marketing. My market involves 95% Airbnb. It's very hard to diversify that way, but there's a lot of places where people can take the extra step and own their market a little bit. Jesse, like you pretty much did that.
And there's different ways. There's different avatars with, you probably talk about this on here with your place. You're in JT, right? You're in Joshua. Okay. Joshua. So you have a lot of people that are on vacation, hanging out and stuff like that. Most markets have, in the midterm space, you have business travelers, you have travel medical professionals, you have the corporate contracts like I just talked about. You talk about the Gallo winery. So there's different avatars to go after. And the cool thing about this is like most properties on Airbnb are geared towards one type of client. So whether that's people partying, bachelorettes, whatever it is. Whereas this space is more of, there's different funnels to reach and connect with different people. You can have a family that loses their home for 3 months, and the next people that come in are business travelers that are working at a hospital. They're physicians. And for me, that's the way to do it is, what does my market have? What are the avatars that are here? What are the companies that are like I just talked about, Gallo or Frito-Lay, like companies that are all over the US, but they need to have these engineers that come for a certain amount of time to work on projects. Those are companies you can call and literally it's like, hey, what do you guys do for housing for people that are coming? This is what I do. This is my market. This is how I operate. Call me if you ever need any housing for any of your folks that are coming. And you'll be surprised on how many people actually do that on a regular basis.
100%. So how do you underwrite these deals? How do you run numbers for how much it's going to make?
Yeah. So that's where it's difficult for most people starting off. And even now it's still super difficult. If it doesn't work as a long-term rental, I'm not buying it. I think that a lot of investors, especially the short-term side, will buy property based off the projections, not the actual, what you can get. And again, we talked about this earlier. I don't look at anything that doesn't have an exit strategy for me. So if I can't make long-term rental work where I'm breaking even or maybe negative a couple $100, I'd buy a property that I'd be negative a couple hundred. I'd be fine with that. Granted, I have that luxury of being able to handle that. But I have to have that first. So I look at what the demand is in the market. You can all go on furnishfinder.com/stats. It'll show you like how many people are searching, what the whole homes are. I look at what hospitals are on our market. I look at what level those hospitals are. And just so you guys know, level 1 and level 2 hospitals are what you would see on Grey's Anatomy, right? You have a trauma doctor that's there. You have a neurosurgeon available. They're in-house all the time. Level 3, level 4 hospitals are more of your rural hospitals that don't have that kind of stuff. Typically level 1 and level 2 hospitals have way more travel nurses. They have higher turnaround, and they have usually a higher patient per nurse ratio. You want to make sure you do those things. Again, we're looking at different funnels, but my main goal is to 2x long-term rental rates. If I can look at what these numbers are going to break, if they're going to work as a long-term, awesome. If it works as a short-term, we can all look that stuff up. And then the midterm space, again, this is me over the years learning how to do this. You're able to look at, again, how am I able to save money for a company? We talked about it with the Dave & Buster company, right? 30,000 as opposed to 10,000. I'm saving that company money. Again, at the end of the day, it's a very difficult process to learn like how much you can actually make. But I typically say, start with 2x. We're going to 2x long-term rental rates, but we're not going to do Airbnb. We're going to be going after these companies individually. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people that are having a ton of success by doing these things. But again, it takes work, it takes energy, it takes time. It's something that doesn't happen overnight necessarily. Sometimes it doesn't, but it's all about building relationships. And for me, I believe that relationships are the new currency. It's a way of getting paid over a long duration of time, which is every business owner. You want to have a long roadway for a business, and that's where relationships play important process in the whole thing.
So do you suggest that if you're going on a contract on a house, that you maybe do the due diligence by maybe reaching out to the local hospital and seeing like what the going rates are, or just how do you understand what would your process be going into a new market, let's say?
Yeah. I always like to buy near a hospital. So within about 5 miles from a hospital, I like to see what the demand is. So again, going back to the Furnish Finder thing, if there's a lot of demand, so say there's 30,000 searches for the last year and there is I'm just going to say 2,000 homes. We know that there's a supply and demand issue there. I can go on Airbnb. I can see what it looks like on there, what my competition looks like. I can use AirDNA and Mashvisor to see what the actual numbers are of people that are making over the year. Price Labs allows you to see 30-day bookings at a time, which is cool. So if you guys have Price Labs, it actually has a tool in there that you can see all the 30-day listings, how much they've made over the last year as well. So it allows you to see these things. So now it gives me context like, cool, if I pick up an Airbnb or a midterm rental here, I have the potential to make this amount of money. But yeah, I go in, I look on LinkedIn. That's another thing that I do. So I'll talk with the nurses. And this is like my golden ticket strategy here. This is what opened the door for me in so many different ways is, again, we talked about earlier, I reach out to these nursing agencies and companies. And on Furnish Finder, we talked about unmatched leads a while ago. There's a bunch of nurses looking for homes to rent. We just pick up the phone and we say, hey, Patryk, my name's Jesse. I own a company, property management agency. We actually house travel medical professionals just like yourself. Have you had a chance to find any housing yet? And you would say yes or no or whatever, whatnot. And I would say, cool, I have multiple different properties. This is my market. If you're interested in this stuff, I'd love to connect with you a little bit further. Do you mind if I have a couple minutes to talk to you?
Yeah.
99% of the time, these nurses will actually tell us what they're looking for, how we can help them. And then I'll ask two important questions. Who is your daddy and what does he? I'm just kidding.
Love that question.
Yeah, I know. Who's your daddy and what does he do? That's from Kindergarten Cop, by the way, for those of you who haven't watched Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yep.
You'll ask, what agency do you work with and what's your recruiter's name? And 9 out of 10 times we'll get that information. Guess what I can do? I can now go on LinkedIn. I can now look at that recruiter. I can connect with that. And just so that for those of you that don't know what LinkedIn is, it's basically Facebook, but for business. I can message that recruiter directly and say, hey, Patryk just gave me your information. He's looking for housing. He's having a problem finding it, whatever the issue is. And guess what that just did for me? I just turned a cold lead into a warm, hot, juicy lead because you and the recruiter are like besties as you're getting ready to go on assignment. So now I've essentially opened that door up to be able to have dialogue, to connect. And that's what I do, man. And we'll just start connecting with how we can help them. How do we serve them? Again, this business is not about, yeah, granted you can make money in it, but the context is the more that you're able to serve people, these companies and these agencies, the more that will come back to you. And you want to be a service provider for them. So we want to get direct contracts with these companies so they're paying us for their housing, not the nurses themselves. Because most nurses
you're
aren't
building the partnerships with the service providers or the hospitals or whatever the case may be to get the clientele.
Because they're looking for two things. They're looking for quality housing and they're looking for professional operators. And those two things are super difficult to find. Believe it or not, most people that are in the Airbnb space or even a midterm space aren't doing things the right way. They're not professional about it. And the nurses and these doctors, they don't want to spend $5,000 on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They can rent a place for $2,500 or $3,000. But we're creating these relationships with these companies where they'll pay for that consistency. They'll pay for that quality. And that's what we're doing is we're building those relationships that are going to pay to serve those folks. Because again, the individual nurses that are looking on their own, they're not going to pay that. They're just not going to pay that kind of money. And we don't want them to.
Jesse, is there any way to succeed in this space if you're not putting in the work and doing the calls and just, let's say I just take it and I just throw it on Furnish Finder, it's not going to work?
Hell no. This is why people will message me every day and say, hey, Jesse, I've had my place on Furnish Finder for the last 2 months. I've got no bookings. I've listed on Airbnb for 30 days. Nobody's booking. Guess what? 99% of people are doing the exact same thing you are. They're sitting around waiting for a booking. You're not going to build a business. I'm in San Francisco with one of the busiest high density traffic Airbnb midterm spaces in the US besides New York and Los Angeles and probably JT and the Smokies. But dude, even with that saturation, we're staying booked 90% of the year because of the relationships that we built. Granted, it's been 8 years, but you have to build those relationships in order to be served over this amount of time. So I would encourage anybody, if you're looking at getting in this space, don't do what everybody else does because you're going to be stuck. You're going to be stuck with your pants down trying to figure stuff out. And a lot of times having those mortgages and those payments, it can sneak up on you. So you have to make sure that you have reserves.
Yeah.
You're being intelligent. You're being an intuitive investor that's looking at where the market's going, who's coming there, who's the people that I can serve, and how do I be proactive instead of reactive? Those are the most important things.
Yeah. And I think, Jesse, is interesting. You can also do this with Airbnbs, right? You can also, as a short-term rental, I say Airbnbs, but as a short-term rental investor, not just midterm rental, short-term rental investor, to be able, at least in this time where it's getting super saturated, being able to build out these relationships and place people in the right places because you have the direct marketing, that can be really beneficial, is to have those relationships and partnerships. And so, Jesse, I'm curious, do you ever have relationships with people to fill short-term bases, or do you ever teach other short-term rental operators on how to fill their off season or with midterm rentals?
Yeah, people have to want to do this, Patrick, just like we talked about earlier, because it's not passive. You're not just listing and waiting. You're actually having to be proactive about this. But again, like I mentioned before, you're building your own house on your own land. And yeah, I think one of the most slept on strategies is kick ass during short-term rental season. If you have the ability to short-term during those peak season markets, transition over to midterm during the slower season. So you don't have, you look at a stock market chart, right? We have these peaks and valleys. That's what happens in the short-term space. We have these awesome months and it crashes. How about staying intuitive and keeping that income up high all year long and not having any of the valleys that come along with it? So yeah, definitely there's a lot of short-term rental operators that are either being forced into midterm because they have to because of regulations, or an intuitive investor. I see this, I see what AirDNA's numbers are, I see what Mashvisor shows. I already been in this market for 3 years. I know what happens in October all the way to March. How do I be proactive and create these relationships and build these funnels so that I can eventually stay booked and not have to worry about the demand and shifting and all that other stuff? So happens all the time, man. Again, I think there's going to be more and more of this. And I think leveraging short-term and midterm together, like a hybrid model, I call it the hybrid model, is probably one of the most slept on strategies in the short-term, midterm space right now.
Jesse, you'd be so proud of me, man. I actually had somebody reach out to me. I didn't reach out to them, to be fair, but I had somebody reach out to me through Airbnb and say, hey, I'm an insurance, I think they were a broker of some sort where they would help insurance misplaced, or if people are building their houses or something like that, they place them, and they were looking for places in Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree. And I was like, bingo, this is what I needed. And I put some bids in for a midterm stay. It didn't happen, but I tried. I did my thing. And so that was really interesting. And that kind of got me thinking, at least recently, that maybe I should be building out that Rolodex to be able to fill the midterm rentals. And Joshua Tree is very odd, but I know there's some people that deploy that strategy. I know I have friends, Nicole and Cam. I don't know if you know them, but they used to fill their Yucca Valley property that wasn't doing as well at certain points in slow season with midterm rentals. I know this is a strategy that a lot of people use, and I think it's honestly the most slept on strategy. I am so in agreement on that. And I think, granted, I haven't done too much of it myself, but I've seen it been very effective for a lot of people when they're in dire situations. Like we're consistently booked, so we don't have that issue.
Right.
But definitely, if you're not getting booked, why not get the midterm rental stays ahead of time?
But it takes work. And that's the thing that I think most people don't realize, especially if you go watch my YouTube channel where I show these bookings and these $12,000 paychecks that we get and all these things. And it takes energy and time. In fact, Patrick, the way that I found out about the insurance claims was through Airbnb in 2016 when I had a company called ALE Solutions message me on Airbnb, and they said, hey, we have a client that lost their home. They actually live, and they gave me the specific road where they were at, and like, how far is this from your property? And I told them it was like 0.2 of a mile away. Kids went to the same school, the same spot, and I ended up getting this booking. It was like $210 a night, whatever my property was during slow season. I had it listed right around there, but normally it's a higher price point. They ended up booking that for 6 months on Airbnb. And I'm just like, dude, this is freaking awesome. After that 6 months ended, I was just done. I was already doing that on the nursing side, but I didn't think about it with the insurance company. Then I had another one, same situation happen. I'm like, why didn't I keep relationships with that relocation specialist? Because they can just keep serving me these clients. So in 2016, I realized like, holy crap, there's a whole nother opportunity here. And this is where it gets crazy, man. Once you learn this business, and especially on the insurance side, say you get a claim in Yucca Valley and you are connected to the recruiter and your places are booked, you have a property management company. So I can essentially connect with other investors that are in my space. And this is what I talk about doing all the time, network with each other in the space. A lot of times Airbnb folks are like, they're like to pick me. I have the best place. I have the best photos. Pick my place. This is it. The midterm side, it's very collective where everybody works together. So if my place is booked, Patrick, I can go to you and say, hey, I got a booking for an insurance company. They're going to pay $11,000. I'm going to want a $1,500 referral fee. That's going to be a hell of a lot more than you're making during your slow season. We're taking care of the client. I'm taking care of my relocation specialist that I created the relationship with, and you're getting your place booked. And then I'm getting that paycheck. So
you get that as an affiliate at that point.
Yeah, but I'm connecting with you as you're the operator. I'm keeping my relationship. I'm nurturing that. I'm connecting that conversation. All I'm doing is connecting you to that person at the very end. They're booking your home and you're getting a direct check. I'm getting a part of that money. So I'm just basically a referral. So we do that all the time.
Owning that flow is important then. Because
100%.
Because then if you own the flow, you can refer out, you get paid for that. And there's all these different things you can
Patrick,
do.
I have a student right now. It's been with me for 4 months. His name's David. He's making $88,000 a month. This month he's made November he made $88,000. He doesn't own a single property. He co-hosts and he does exactly what I'm talking about. But in those 4 months, he's been able to build all these relationships where somebody needs a house in middle America. He's going and finding that property for him, connecting, and then getting a little piece of the pie. He also does these big claims in like Beverly Hills, up in the mountains in LA. He just had a booking for $42,000 a month, believe it or not. Insurance companies pay that. Those properties out there are worth $22 million. So he's literally making this giant piece of money by literally just going on Zillow, connecting with the homeowner, saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm connecting point A to point B. This family wants to go check out your house. And literally that's how he makes his money, is he doesn't own anything.
He's a middleman.
Yeah, he's just connecting people.
So what's the typical fee, referral fee?
It really depends on the client. I don't like to charge a whole lot. People will charge 10%, 20%. I typically charge 7%. But yeah, if you're getting a $30,000 booking over, say it's $10,000 a month for 3 months, that's 30 grand, 10%, that's 3K. Yeah, cool. I'll take that. Who's not, dude, you and I both co-host. To make 3 grand on one home you got to do 20 something, 30 something thousand a month. Sorry about that. You got to make that cash to be able to get that. Right. And for us, we were able to do that doing this by literally just connecting person A to person B. But it's definitely a way to build, man.
So you could build a whole business just on referrals,
100%.
which is huge. I didn't even think of that. And walk me
Your
through.
head's spinning right now, Patryk. You're just like,
Yeah, my head's spinning. Walk me through how you keep and track all these referrals. I guess do you use a CRM, a customer relationship management platform?
Believe it or not, we do. And we didn't for a long time. My VAs were like freaking losing their minds because
that's what I'm saying, Jesse. You didn't know what you were doing. You just worked with the flow and you just made it happen, right?
Yeah, we're using Salesforce now. And just so you guys know, like my last jobs that I've had, my job was to keep track of all these. And I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. My job was to keep track of all the flow of these people that I worked with. That were how many sales they got, how many accounts they go into, all these things. It took me years to realize like I can use these same CRMs, but with this business. And that's exactly what we do now. We use Salesforce. Nice. We put everything in there. So we've created a database. So I know like everybody that has properties in California, they're all put up under this California database. So if we get a referral, we'll then call those people and say, hey, can we connect? I have a Facebook group that's private where there's, 10,000 people in there. If I get a booking that I can't handle, I'll go on the Facebook group and say, hey, who's got a house in Los Angeles, this zip code, I need a 3-2 like right away. Somebody will post on there, I'll connect with them, and then we'll get the ball rolling. If it's a nice property, if it's going to fit the mold, then we'll get the family to go check it out. And then if we get that booking, awesome, we'll pay them out as a referral fee. So there's multiple different ways to make money in this space. It's not just like a linear path. There's many different ways. And I think that a lot of times people don't realize that. Again, this is a business. Like you have to think about it like a business. And Airbnb is great because it gives you that ability that people that don't have business experience to get a little taste of what it feels like. And that could be the fuel that you need to build something on your own. It's cool, man. I think the combination of both of those things is really important.
Dude, you just, I didn't even know that this was what the episode is going to be about, but that has to be what the episode is about, is how to fill slow season with midterm bookings or how to get midterm rental bookings. That's awesome, dude. A lot of people can benefit from that. Not just getting midterm rentals, but how to get midterm rental bookings.
For sure.
Jesse, to close this off, because we're getting to the hour mark, I wanted to go into the last 3 questions. Woo!
Ooh, 3.
Nothing too crazy, but I have one special question I think of on the spot, and then 2 that I just give to everybody. But first one, and I think I know what you're gonna say. What's the book that you would recommend to the audience? It can be anything.
You know what I'm gonna say already, man.
Yep. Yeah. You don't have to say it. You don't have to say it.
if you guys can pick up one book and actually read this book and study it and what they talk about, what Dale Carnegie talks about, you implement those things into your life. You talk about connecting with people. It will 100% change your life. Everything that we do in our life has sales that's attached to it, whether that's us deciding where we're going to go eat for dinner with our spouse or partner or whatever. Like we're selling the concept of here's where we're going. So I think that a lot of time when I realized that early on in my life, I started to get really good at that. I didn't even know the book yet until probably 2013 when I told you I started to learn more and I wanted to, I opened that frequency up of wanting to pick up more information and learn more. So yeah, that would be the book, man, that I would say just really learn and understand and just practice it, practice connecting with people. I'm an introvert, by the way.
You're an introvert.
I am not an extrovert. So when you see me out in public or I'm talking on these stages or it's super hard for me, man. I am not somebody that's like a public type person like that. I'm very keep me in my room. I'll stay in my space. Like it takes a lot of energy for me to do that.
Yeah.
But I think again, if you want to be successful at things, you have to be able to turn on like a light switch, and you have to be able to turn off when you need to. You have to be able to retreat. And I think that there's a lot of introverts that are able to build substantial businesses by doing that. You don't have to be this like extrovert that goes like, I look at Pace Morby and I'm just like, damn, I wish I had that energy. And I've talked to him in person, like where I'm like literally having conversations with him. And I'm like, man, when I'm done with these events, like I want to sleep for 24 hours. He's like, man, I'm in my room doing push-ups. That's how energized I get. So everybody reacts in a different way. Like everybody has a different principle of how they operate, and that's okay. But just know your power and know what's good for you, what's not good for you, and absorb that thing. And you can, again, something I believe, nature versus nurture, like people can learn how to do these things.
100%. And I'm going to go say also, Jesse, you did use a topic of the whole book, how to influence how to win friends and influence others. You did use the whole name dropping. You've probably said my name, I don't know, 30, 40 times.
Yeah.
There's probably a counter somewhere, ding, ding, ding,
yeah,
30 or 40 times. But that is the whole essence. Like people love hearing their name. And even sometimes I would just be my thoughts about something that you've been talking about, and you say Patryk, and it'll snap me right back into reality. It's crazy how powerful it is, even when you know that it's there. But yeah, that was cool, Jesse. That was cool, Jesse. Anyways, so second question: what's in store for Jesse? What's the future look like for you?
Man, I feel like my life is gone from, we just talked about this offline, that when you start getting to this space and you start getting noticed and recognized, the thing that you did that got you where you are, you start to slowly lose. I feel like I'm becoming more of a content creator, and you might feel this too, where I'm spending a lot of my energy and time creating content. So I want to get back to doing the work that I do. I coach people. I talked about that already. But for me, I'm looking to continue to get on stages, have my own events, be around awesome people, and to buy more real estate. Like I truly believe that buying real estate can help not only people that need housing, these nurses and these companies that need these types of housing, but I also believe that's what's going to build wealth for me. And I've watched it happen with people over and over again, and I think it's powerful. So I'm going to continue to buy more deals, and not single family anymore. I'm going to be buying more multifamily. That's where I'm going now.
There you go, baby. Are you going to do midterm rentals, the multifamily?
Yeah, I'm going to get big contracts with big places, and then just fill those 20-plex, maybe 15 units, and we'll allocate those to midterm, and hopefully they pay us no matter whether the places are booked or not. And then the other 5 will just be steady long-term, or maybe even some short-term.
Awesome. You said you're an entrepreneur and you fall into this midterm rental space, and now you're known as a midterm rental guy. And that's like who you are, and that's your title, right? But you do talk a lot about entrepreneurship. You do talk a lot about business. And I feel like I almost think that you get more excited about business when you talk about business than you do even about midterm rentals. And I can feel that way too with short-term rentals when you talk about the same thing, the locks and all that, the same questions. You like the business side. And so I'm curious, if you could start let's say you're not known as the midterm rental guy, you can start fresh with anything. It has to be something different from midterm rentals. What would you want to be known for? I think that's a good question for you.
Dude, I would stay where I'm at. Do I have to get out of it? Do I have to leave it? Because
you have to leave midterm rentals. Well, if it wasn't midterm rentals, what would your niche be? Like, what would your thing be? What are you passionate about? What do you love?
I do love business.
Make a business out of?
I do love business. I just love business in general. I really love it. I love you and I talked about Cody Sanchez offline. I love her idea of buying these old beat up businesses and then just adding some new marketing and doing some new things that can, a lot of these old businesses that have been around forever are still operating like the 1970s. So I truly believe in that entrepreneurship can be nurtured, where people can learn how to do these things. So I probably would go in that route. I think it's a lot more complicated, and there's a lot more people that are savvy in those spaces, but I would encourage everybody now, find a niche or niche, whatever word you want to use for that. Cause I don't know if I subscribe to the niche. That's just weird to me. I'm gonna use niche here. Yeah. I just find a niche, doesn't matter what it is, and just stick in that, stay in that. Don't get the shiny object syndrome. Just focus all in on those specific things and just continue to grow. But I think that's where I'd be, man. I do love business though. Truly do.
There you go. Thank you so much for not only sharing midterm rental stuff, but business stuff, because midterm rentals are business, as you said. Yeah. This is a really great podcast. Thank you so much. For the people that are like, holy moly, you resonated with me. How do I get in touch with Jesse? What do you have to say to those people?
Yeah, I would say go check out my YouTube stuff. There's a ton of free game on there, like tons of free game on there. That's just type in Jesse Vasquez in the search bar. And then if you want to get some like bite-sized information on a regular basis, head over to my Instagram, which is at the real Jesse Vasquez. I would say those are the two places to go check out my stuff.
That's awesome, man. And you're an awesome guy. You're a very giving person as well. So definitely check out the stuff. I'm sure he's going to even respond to your DM. That's the kind of guy Jesse is. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man, and just sharing your wisdom and your ability to not know, but know a lot. There you have it. Yeah. Take care, brother. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Thanks, man. Take care, everybody.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Patryk Real Estate Show. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patryk in the show notes below. Until next time.